understanding perspective, a new way of looking at things in the age of the internet, social media, and online newspaper. The main thing I'm trying to do here is to equip you not just for your work um, at at your station or newspaper, but to equip you as a journalist who could have an international exposure, who could learn beyond your current job. So I'm going to talk about what news is, get you to understand, and what it takes to report and write a fresh and engaging news story. I will explain with my background in a second. So after that, I'm just going to give you two examples of how I, as a reporter, did this kind of news story we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so my journalism background, as reporter, editor, columnist, Guardian, Daily Times, Post Express, Punch, and several others. I also worked in the United Kingdom for the Independent newspaper, which is one of the big national papers in the UK. I reported Nigeria for them, and I worked for West Africa magazine as columnist, editorial consultant. That looked like this was the major African news magazine at the time. In the US, I worked for San Jose Mercury News, one of the top 10 newspapers in the US, as an editorial board member, and also wrote stories and a column. I also worked for the Virgin Islands Daily News, where I introduced narrative writing, the kind we're going to talk about today, and it's also, I'm drawing my two stories from that newspaper. I've been a trainer for the major newspapers in this country and television, including Channels TV and a major newspaper in Ghana. I wrote a book, one journalism book called Story Building, Narrative Techniques for News and Feature Writers. It's been adopted as a textbook in the US, in universities in the US, Canada, and Australia. So I had to give you that background so you can see whether it was worth your while coming or not, or listening. So let's talk about news. We know news is what happened. That was then. News is no longer what happened. News is what is relevant. News is what people need to run their lives safely. So I just want to use a quick example to say that the example is a Champion Brewery truck crashes against the curb and or hits a tricycle, hits a keke, and overturns, and spilling 100 cartons of beer lost. Okay, interesting story in the ancient days. If you say Champion Brewery truck crashes, what you left out was that it blocked the car on the road. That means that you should find alternative ways of going to work, to your business. That's what you want, not because you don't have shares in breweries. Even if you do, you may not be a beer drinker, you may not care about some other person's business. As a reader, as a listener, as a viewer, you are interested in what relates to you, what you find interesting to your interest. So we in Nigeria till today, and many countries, we've been fighting this battle in the US, UK, Australia to say old news, hard news is no longer news in today's circumstances. Hard news is not news. I call it the walking dead. So let's look at some examples. Before then, just to let you know that what I'm talking about is called narrative, and it's giving context to what happened, telling a story in a way that people can relate to without undermining the news value. It's the same news, the same hard facts, but giving more by working harder and getting more. So it takes more commitment from you. It takes more time, and it takes reporting. By reporting, I mean gathering the facts. As we know, we gather them from interviews, eyewitness accounts, research, the three key ones. And today, we can use the social media and all other kind of sources. So what we're talking about is a fresh angle of the same news. We should be fancy. You are not making up anything. You are not being colorful. You are more substance. It's about news substance, not about color. News substance. So here's an example of a lead from an newspaper about it was the Oklahoma City bombing, and a domestic terror attack. Before the dust and the rage had a chance to settle, actually rain started to fall on the blasted out wreck of what has once been an office building, and on the shoulders of the small army of police, firefighters, and medical technicians that surrounded it. That is pulling the reader straight into what happened through observation and interviewing. By the time a terrorist attack happens, everybody knew about it. It's on TV everywhere. It's on radio. Why do you want to read the same thing tomorrow morning? There's no basis for that. And today, now, because we have internet, we have social media, news is on the hour. We have online newspapers. Whatever's happening now is going to be reported somehow in the next few minutes. So for us news writers, for us TV and radio kind of workers, we have to say, what can we do to show our professionalism and give more than what anybody can give, including, the blogger? How do you do that? What distinguishes a good journalist from a non-journalist in this era? So the formula that I use is like, first, hook the reader in. Give them something that makes them interested in that story. And then let the point of the story. Remember, we're not writing novels, we're not writing features, we're writing news now. And that applies, I think, even to the electronic media, because it depends on what angle are you taking in the story. So the brewery truck, we talk about old school. A truck carrying beer crashed yesterday, and it spilling 20 cartons and how many bottles, then one quotation from a passerby and stuff, and then you're finished. But this one, you would say, this X road has been shut down following the crash of a beer truck. Now, that will help me plan my day. This road is shut. That's the latest news, the important news. The people do not care about crashes unless you make it interesting. So you give it a thread that runs through, because a story, the different parts of it, and then you give it a memorable ending, which would often be, again, facts. We are talking facts, verifiable facts that you have gathered. We are not talking about fancy. We're not talking about creative writing. We are talking about plain, raw knuckle reporting, getting it. So what is involved from my experience? Facts, scene, people, story, interviews, and follow-up interviews by phone or in person, observation and observation and observation. Leg work, ear work, listening, hand work, hard work. Follow it, love it, get it. Think of how excited they will be when they see this detail that you picked up. An example I shared with a friend this morning, the president, God forbid, the president of Nigeria is dead. Right. If you write that story tomorrow, you should be stoned. Because everybody, my dead grandmother, knows that the person is dead. But if you go and find out that he died, that he fell off his bed and died, or he had diarrhea, or he was complaining all day that he was feeling faint. So the story changes. Diarrhea killed the president is stronger, more interesting than the president is dead. That is already known. Why do you want to tell me the known? News is about the unknown. What the ordinary person does not know. By this time tomorrow, every ordinary person, every ticket driver, everybody knows the president is dead. But what they don't know is what journalists were called to do, to find what they have the skills to find and to share. So the third part is research. So interviews upon interviews, observation, research. So who keep people into the event? For me, the idea is to make readers say, wow, how could he get this? Story structure, I'm not going to really focus on that today. I'm just going to move on to try and get you an example, a real example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so when I was working for the Daily News on a Sunday afternoon, I was working on a story. And the news editor calls me and says, hey, there's a crash. Leave what you're doing, go cover it now. So a routine highway accident on a Sunday afternoon. So again, I want to tell the story in a way that nobody else could, that a non-journalist could not have been able to tell. So this was my lead, the irony of life and death, a wristwatch. Like, think about that for a second. I'm actually summing up the story. It's only one of the million approaches. So, the development, the gold citizen watch that flew off the wrist of the driver of the mangled Suzuki Sidekick was frozen at 4:25 p.m., the time the passenger died on impact. We're going to talk about how did you know that? How did you find that? Point of the story, by the time the ambulance arrived, Encarnacion, wearing red swimming trunks under his blue jeans, was dead. His watch was still running. None of this is fiction. This is what happened. But how do you get it? So I was supposed to ask you a question. What's the value of swimming trunks in the story? Can somebody tell me? Talk to me. Is there any value to that detail? To swimming trunk? He's wearing swimming trunk under his pants. Does that tell us any story about the person? Exactly. He was swimming. He was just come from the beach. So he died from running from the beach to catch a flight. So that's why the speed. How about the citizen watch? Let's say if I said a Rolex, for example, it would tell you something about the person. So those details are not just fancy, they are crucial in letting you understand the character of what happened, of the people. So a few more details. So this is the story. At 4, note precision. Precision is the key. Get it, the time, the colors, getting everything that's real hard news facts. The red car roaring down the eastbound side of Veterans Drive overtook a small white car, banked on the left, leveled a fence, and charged into a trailer parked opposite the Frenchtown post office. its indicators still blinking. This, I got to the scene some minutes after the accident, and I saw it. And the other details about what happened, I wasn't there. I asked people who saw it. They told me about the color of the car. They told me what happened. They were there. So when I got there, what I can see, they couldn't see from a distance. Because I have access as a journalist, I could pick that. I could pick the time. You know how I knew? Because good reporters touch dead man. I looked at his watch, of the dead person's watch. I looked at the dead person's underpants to see what color it was. Yeah. So that's how I knew the time. So then I took a quotation, the standard news quotation. I knew that at that speed, the car was just headed for an accident, said Dwight Simmons, manager of the nearby Texaco service station, who dialed 911. So, scene of the accident, who is around? Saw his filling station, ran to the guy. I said, what happened? Did you see it? Yes, I saw it. What did you see? When? How? Why? What do you? Who called the ambulance? I called the ambulance. So this is a story that people who's not a reporter could never write. The driver, I found out the name and age and where he's from, was hurrying to the seaplane dock so Encarnacion, who was wearing red swimming trunks, could get back to St. Croix, where he was a firefighter at the Richmond Fire Service Station substation. So I found out, I was interested in knowing who is this guy, where does he work, in which fire station. Old time reporting, he's worked in St. Croix, thanks, run. We don't ask him, works where? For, as what? So it's asking questions, it's being interested. I just, quick forward, I'm going to talk about interviewing later on. When I interviewed President Ibrahim Babangida, just that we see you reading with it on TV, how much did it cost? People that Nigerians might want to know. And he said, it cost nothing. I said, ha. He said, really tell me. He said, it was a gift. I said, okay, a gift from whom? A gift from a Lebanese major contractor for the government. So something as this tells you a story because you want to know, because you want to find out. You don't stop at the block, the face, the surface. You need to know. So somebody's dead. You could say, a dead man, find the name and run. You could say, what does he look like? Who is he? Hard news would not tell you that. This news will be fresh tomorrow and the day after because nobody has been able to tell it because a reporter was there. That's the point. That's the difference. It's good narrative story is eternal because no two other person could have done what you've done. No other person is you. Right? So the next details, I looked at the details of police and ambulance arrival and activity and the police charge of vehicular homicide to the surviving, to the driver. Those are the things that I found out, called the police right in there and got things. So now I wanted to remember the car is there before they told where I'm there. So I was able to find out what year was it. Find the year? Who can tell me how to find the year of a car? Yes, where in the car? By the side of the door, the seat belt has a little strap that when you look at it, you know that's the year. So I went there, opened it, as 1998. And then I looked at the dashboard, the odometer, 11,000 miles is covered. So why is that important? The mechanical nature, the age of the car could be a factor in an accident. So you want to find out. Let it be that you have enough. Remember what we said in the newsroom? You get 10 times more than what you want to use. Get it and let your editor say doesn't want it. I had a good editor who was like, wow, I have never read an accident story that's so engaging. Okay. The car's airbag popped only on the driver's side. Observation. What does that tell us? The, the, the airbag popped only on the driver's side. What does that tell us? Please save my life and tell me. It's crucial. It means that the driver was saved because the driver survived and the passenger died because his seat, what do you call it again? Airbag did not pop. That explains the accident. That explains the death, right? So if you're not watching that, you don't have the story, because the story is that, remember, the driver survived, but the other person died. So that's the story. So this other one, okay, so the driver's airbag popped only on the car's airbag popped only on the driver's side. It saved the driver's life by pushing his head out of the window. There you go. So, detail. That's how he survived. Okay, I interviewed a woman somewhere else. I found her just around there. I was aware of the accident and found out from her that around that time that her husband, a civil servant, was knocked down by a speeding careless driver in the same area. So I think that just gives you a sense of the area, a sense of the problem with speeding. When the airbag popped, this guy would have been speeding. He was trying to catch a plane, so he was speeding and lost control. The police did not tell me that, and I did not say that, but I gave enough information for people to deduce what happened. The car is old, mechanically unsound, because the airbag only one popped instead of both. So this is my ending I was talking about. Like, the ending is not creative, it's just like where you decide to put what facts that you've got. This was interesting because I was the only reporter who stayed. Everybody grabbed and ran. Every other reporter grabbed and ran. I stayed till it's all over. And then that was my ending. Within an hour, the scene of Sunday's accident was deserted. The only telling reminders of the crash were the fallen fence, still there, the car's right mirror, which fell off, the trailer that much in that changes. Remember the dead president? The headline of narrative doesn't change, except for the approach. The president is dead. Dead story. The president died of, that is fresh approach. It's only that it's the latest. That's what's new, what's up, not what's down. And let's say a car road blocked. It's strong because of truck crash blocks a car road, for example. The story is from now on, but the police will tell you how long it might take. Then in your intro, car road will not be open until the police said, this following the crash, which everybody really knows, of a brewery truck. So it is the latest, the most important, the more interesting aspect of a story. That's what we are after. And don't be scared. Remember that you may not adopt the entire thing, but you could pick elements that will work for your story, make your story richer and better, and makes your editor say, you did a good job there. So you need a human angle, a human relevance to what happened. There's no more blank stories that people are interested in. Yes, sir.
Microphone for comments and observations. You said perhaps is there anything you could have done better involved in getting this story out? Perhaps you could have done better by sniffing the mouth of the dead the corpse to ascertain if he was not drunk. Maybe that's what you could have done better.
Okay. Down to earth with what we have been doing, and then he doesn't understand this. He might be forced to, or maybe tear the paper away, and then or tell you rewrite the story again. And then secondly, from like I was trying to tell you about the Western media, is this from the type of story like they are telling us that they say that they are bringing down, or what they write or what they publish is not good for this country. They are painting this other side of the world in the negative light.
Thanks actually for asking that question twice, so I didn't forget it. Now, let's look at it this way. I had when I was in Australia some time ago, I saw the Obasanjo was coming. He was president then for, I think, this Commonwealth event, and the foreign minister who I knew, and one of the things we talk about as a reporter, you should know these people and they should know you, said, hey, Ndayo, what are you doing here? Why don't you come back and help build your country? And I said, Minister, I am your ambassador here, because what I'm doing is that people talk about our people being given wrong coverage, poor negative coverage. I'm here, I'm teaching the same people how to report properly. For example, I send my reporters to go out to get a story. By that time, Mugabe and Zimbabwe, only 1 out of 20 students cared to call the Zimbabwean embassy. They all collected one negative side and they ran with it. So my job as a journalist and as an educator is to say to them, you need to balance. And you need to remove yourself. You need to get rid of your bias and face what really happened. So now, I did say something which might not have been picked, because my mom said I speak too fast, and that may be true, even libelous, but true. The thing is, I said that some of this, the entire thing might not work for everybody, that you could pick what works and enrich your story. You're working harder to get more facts. I also said that this kind of writing is serving you beyond your normal job now. If your editor refuses it, but sometimes if you give him real good stuff and you bring, they might pick part of it, or they may give more space, or they may tear it and throw it in your face. And then you say, you're looking out who is hiring, CNN, Al Jazeera, New York Times, who's looking for somebody, because you've raised your act. That's what's happening out there. So for me here, I didn't come here to train you on what you know, because your news editors, your structures can do that and bring something outside to say, I am in this movement, and hard news is still being practiced in the West, by the way. But more newspapers are moving to this because hard news is stale news. So I'm bringing to my town, to my people, something that I have found, and I started here. And I wrote narrative here. When I was editor and writer at the Guardian Sunday Supplement. That's how we wrote. When I was editor at the Post Express, that's how we wrote. So it depends on your goals. If you see journalism as a meal ticket, you get everything and you get whatever you can, fine. Or you see it as a journey that you say, look at yourself, who do you want to be? Are you willing to work for it? So that's for me. So for me, it's always been like, journalism can get me money, can make me comfortable, because you write one article, and gets published, 300 words. It would probably be your 6 month salary, if not 1 year. So this is career development stuff, not so much in-house stuff, because you could expand yourself. That's what I'm bringing. Okay, so we've done that. Okay, a quick, I'm not going to rest on this one. Just a meeting story that, that I decided to report in the narrative. Osoro will be right in saying long lead. Yes, long lead, but long lead. But the editor will determine that. The editor might think it's good and he would pass it. So it was a simple, very boring story. Some organization is organizing a seminar for young criminals. by bringing in prisoners to tell them about the dangers of crime. You know, kids from the poor neighborhoods. So boring. I mean, like, when I did this story, I was already editor of national newspapers. But now, and I love being reporting, I'm going to report that. So why do you send me to cover that? Then I said the best way to pay back is to do something that nobody else can do. So I picked on one of the youngsters, bright-eyed, wearing an electric blue shirt. And he told us, pick what he said, he likes to steal. He said that in public. That's interesting. Then one of the adults on the other side said, stealing is ugly, his words. The boy was 9, I found out his age. The man was 35. I was playing with words. That's a bit of fancy there. You don't have to do this. Because 035 was his prison number at the specific prison. So I've had to find out, you're a prisoner, what was your number? And I'm going to pause here to say how details like this saved me from losing my job when I was editor. That was at the Post Express, and we did a story about an ECOMOG commander. ECOMOG was Nigeria's special forces, ECOWAS forces in Liberia. We did this story that a senior commander had been court-martialed, tried in a military place, and tried and found guilty, and we said of looting from what we got, and was in Krikri prison. That was the story. The man had good lawyers. 10 million naira was a lot of money at the time. So he sued us for 10 million, said libel. That's why facts are important. So I said, fine. What was funny is that one of my reporters came to me and said, editor, why don't you run this story that I brought? I said, I'm not ready. He said, you claim to be brave. You claim to be fearless. Why don't you run this story? I said, because I want facts. He's in Krikri? Fine. I want to know in what wing, what room, who visited him the last time. Get me the facts, I'll run the story. I want to know that this guy is truly in Krikri. Anyway, so he got me this, I ran the story. The next day, the libel case came. Now, how did I escape? So I met a friend of mine, very influential guy. I was in his house, and there was a judge, his friend. So I said, Judge, I'm having this libel case. What would you do? He said, because they said, yes, it's true that he was in ECOMOG. It's true, he was court-martialed. It's true, he was found guilty. It's true, he's in Krikri. It's true, however, it wasn't for looting. It was not for looting. So the judge said to me, well, tell them that you correct the story. They should tell you what was it for. Was it for murder? So we got one little fact wrong, but we got everything else right. In any court of law, you're going to be fine because you have proven that you've done everything human to check the story to be accurate. You're not God, so you make a mistake. So we didn't hear from them again. The people were panicking. I said, don't worry. Tell them to tell us what they did. Was it rape? We'll correct the story. They never come back. So the issue, again, narrative comes back to that. If we did not get that detail, we would have gone, I would have lost my job. We had to say, tell me the room, the wing, the room, who visited him last. So go there, build contacts and say, who's the guest? Bring that to me. Relationship with the visitor. So this is about getting the facts, Well, editors, some are good, some are very good. Some are excellent. I wouldn't say anything bad about editors in the room. Even that was one. So don't worry about editors. Do a good job. If the editor, if the editor says no, throws a story at you, the saying, the stone that the builder rejected has become a chief cornerstone. That is your ticket to good assignments. Anyway, basically, I like this quote where the person said, you won't find candies in prison. They were trying to convince these young people to not go, to say how terrible prison is. So I just try to capture as much detail as possible, precise detail, people, what they said, what they did, what they wore. You'll see, for example, Jacqueline Monsato was in prison for embezzlement. So we talked about that. Then I ended the story with the boy who likes to steal. So go back and just focus on the boy again. Yeah. So key points. Details, strong verbs, action, what really happened, not fancy, hard details, tiny details, get it, and decide not to use it, but get it. Selective, the details must have relevance to understanding, not just fancy. Anecdotes means that when you interview people, ask for more details. I give you the last one, I'm going to close with this one, where I was covering the Senate at the time when I was working in the US. And then one lawmaker came and said they were trying to regulate tattoos. You know? It's a woman. Guess what I asked her when I interviewed her? Madam, do you have a tattoo? I said, yes. Where? I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think even if you were here before you started or you came much later, from any part you start, you would agree with us that it deserves another round of applause. I think even if you did not permit a pastor to call you a professor, I think those of us who are much younger could be permitted to call and address you as Professor Ndayo Uku. And I think wherever you are going to, or wherever you are, for the mere fact that that name has its root in Akwa Ibom State, makes us proud. I will not answer the question you asked the senator, where that the spot, the tattoo, is located. But I think the first thing I'll go back here with is your knack for details. And I think that is expected of us. Good enough, the quality of persons, the journalists who are here, I should say the best, or one of the best, among the best in this state. And the lecture was actually meant for them. There's no hiding place for us. We would continue to be bombarded by professors. The first person has finished, but then it will be too risky to have them head to head. So I crave the indulgence of the House that those of us who came shortly after we had finished the introduction will introduce ourselves before we have another session. But let me introduce the #1 journalist in Akwa Ibom State. At the council, they call him Right Honorable, since those who repeat election as if they were failing exams call themselves Right Honorable. So we also, at least, we had one thing to learn from the legislators. So because he's doing a second term, we are calling him the Right Comrade Amos Etuk. He has changed the face of journalism practice in Akwa Ibom State. And I'm sure he has his way of registering his ambassadors. I'm sure before you travel out, he will look for a way to put you in one chapel. And if I'm permitted, I would suggest the chapel you should go to. He is our leader in this place. Please, apart from the NJ chairman, another person who came after the introduction, it's important for them to know those who are.
Still morning. Good morning, my people. My name is Isaiah Eka. I work with the News Agency of Nigeria, NAN.
Good morning, all. My name is Tony Anichebe. I work with the New Telegraph newspaper.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pasi Anthony, state correspondent, The Nation newspaper.
Good morning, dear colleagues. My name is Ekemini Simon. I work with the Mail newspaper.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victor Mana. I work with Silverberg TV.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Atanyang. I work with Watchman Post.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Otobong Billy. I work with XL 106.9 FM.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Clement Barikui. I work with the Nigerian Television Authority.
Good morning, all. My name is Patience John. I work with AKBC.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Miriam Ikbutu. I work with AKBC.
Justice Dawsor is my name. I work with the Kwaiban Broadcasting Corporation television service.
Henry Income is my name, the Censor newspaper. Good morning.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. When Pastor Okwe started, he talked about the fact that his former student confessed that he didn't know that that fine lecturer, professor they had in the university, was also, I should say, is also a very fine writer who owned columns in reputable newspapers. And I really commend Dr. Okwe for not mentioning the name of the student or former student before the professor would apply to the Senate that the grades of that particular student should be reviewed. So the next person we are going to listen to is equally a professor, but this time around is not going to be in the classroom or the four walls of the University of Uyo, but the four walls of MGM Hotel. And he's going to take us on a topic that has been carefully selected to read, Show, Don't Tell. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Des Wilson. I think we should sustain it till he's here.
Good morning, my friends. Good morning, Professor. I think I have the right to call him Professor. Ndayoko. Yeah, I think it's, I must say that it's an act of God that I'm able to be present at this training session. I wasn't sure what it was going to be like, and besides I was out of Uyo for the whole of this week and came back last night. And at the time I came back, I wasn't even sure of the schedule for this exercise. But maybe I should have started by thanking Ndayo for doing this. Pastor Netupe called it giving back. So what he has done is a challenge to some of us. The only difference is that we earn naira here and some. So we may not be able, unless we team with some others, to do something like that. I think it is a very good thing to do. Get those who are in the field to learn about some new things, and especially consider the fact that some of us left school a long time ago and have not really been participating in events like this. I must also please give some kind of apology here for not being able to produce anything that could be you could see on the screen, because I just managed to do this longhand this morning. I was tired already. Actually, I went to school like this in Abuja. We're being trained on how to train media people and others under the new NUC Core Curriculum Minimum Academic Standards document, which was passed just recently. So I would apologize for not making it possible for you to have the experience of some kind of digital performance. Incidentally, I think I'm still largely analog in some ways. I was told to talk about media writing, but specifically creative writing. But I will crave your indulgence also to talk about, at least to refer to some other kinds of media writing that are not necessarily creative. You cannot say that they are essentially creative forms of writing, but some see those other forms as perhaps mechanical. So the areas I would touch upon, I'm very glad that Dayo mentioned, or Professor Oko mentioned a lot of things about news. And he said some things that excited me, and some things that I need to criticize him for. I didn't want to ask the question while I was seated there. Well, it appears to me that he gave the impression that news is the story of events that happened in the past, that now you are talking about ongoing events. Yes, I think maybe I didn't get him right, but I think news is about the past and the present and what is ongoing. When a television news reporter is at the scene of maybe a fire incident, and let me use the now new pronoun, and they are talking about telling you the camera is on, maybe at the background, he's telling you about this event. He gradually moves from something that looks like an immediate past to something that is going on. And he tells the viewers, yeah, behind me you can see the billowing of the fire and the amount of destruction that is causing. Yes, before he gets to the point that you are being brought to the immediate present, there was a past. And of course, I'm not saying that he actually said that we should completely walk away from telling the story as it happened. Because when you report the death of a person, you say the Senate president is dead. The death could not have just happened as you were saying it. It happened in the past. But that is a style of news writing. You say it's dead, you report it in the present, using the present tense. So I would not totally agree that everything should be seen as happening in the past. And for this reason, I would like to look at some definitions of news. Before I get into my main assignment, I'm just trying to also contribute to what he did to us earlier. And maybe because, as his mother told him, he speaks very fast, and maybe I missed part of the things he said. News. There are so many definitions of this particular commodity. I think I see it as a commodity. That one of such definitions is that news is information that wasn't known before, or current events broadcast over the radio, television, online, or in print media. Something that you didn't know before. So, for example, when a story is out and I don't have it, when I go to the net, I see a lot of stories that I also missed because I didn't have time to look at them. As far as I'm concerned, if I didn't get to know about those events before then, the report is new. The information is new, so it's news. Since news is about something that is new. So it is not everyone that gets this thing immediately as it happens. For those of us who more or less cohabit with television channels, or we keep our phones on our chest or before us, we may be getting them, but you know, it also depends on which of the social networking sites that you have decided to connect with. So I also believe in the old definition that news is about something that you didn't know. Someone defined it as something that happened a moment ago. Or some other person described it as something that happened a jiffy ago. So all kinds of definitions are there. So, but we do not discountenance the fact that the new media have all created new visions for us. They have created situations where, yes, we see news as something that is almost coming out of us every minute of the day, every moment. So I think having made those two interventions, I don't want to spend much time looking at news is, what news is. Let me go to what I was asked to do about, yes, but I said that I was going to talk about news, editorial, features, creative writing, critical writing, business writing. These are all the forms of writing in the media that you bring creativity into them. Creativity you will find sometimes in headline casting. There is a headline story that I read when I was in secondary school. It was when my secondary school then won the Principal's Cup in Lagos. And the headline was this. It was cast by SB. SB was a famous Daily Times News sports editor. And the headline has remained in my head since then. The cup, you know, when you win a competition, a cup competition up to 3 times, I think they rest that cup, they allow it to stay with you, then they may bring out another one. So Casey won that cup that year, and the headline was, Casey keeps cups for keeps. Casey keeps cups for keeps. And then if you know the grammar of keeping things for keeps, you know that, oh, that was a creative one. I read also a story about, also in the 60s, when England won the World Cup. In scoring the third goal, the reporter now said, he described, this is an arena, Wembley. He said, Wembley boiled over. You can imagine a place where everyone was crazy, chanting. So I'm just talking, there are many more creative headline casting that you find in newspaper writing and in other forms of writing. Now, having listed creative writing as my focus, I want to also talk about those things that are normally found in the news media, which fall within the class you may call creative writing. You have short stories. Newspaper journalists, let me say, also write short stories. And then there are also persons who are not journalists per se, but they write for newspapers and magazines. You have things that sometimes we don't care about to know, but I'm just letting it out. There is a book that I'm trying to do. Incidentally, I started that book when COVID came, and we couldn't go to work. So I started the work, and I looked at some of these areas, like humor. In every aspect of media writing, you introduce, you see, no matter how serious the situation may be, no matter, even if you want to behave like Fela Aníkúlápó Kuti, who, when he was alive, he was asked, why are you always singing about things that talk about struggle, fight, no love songs? You don't sing love songs. He said, how can I sing about love songs when Nigerians are hungry, Nigerians are poor and all that? But even in your poverty, there is humor. People laugh. I enjoy a lot of humor. I like things that are sprinkled with humor. You tell a story, you're talking about something serious, but you can say it in a way that people will really be excited about. Even citations, they are not written usually by journalists, but you find that I know many of those who write citations. Sometimes I've had some stints in creative writing. And citations are not necessarily Western. You know, there is something the Yoruba people call oriki, praise songs about people. When people are called up to be honored, you read a document about it. There is a style of writing. Citations. It is creative. Most of the things I read in this part, and in fact, it's become a tradition when people are talking about citations, they are reading biographies. They have written biographies. Biographies are not the same thing as citations. They have their own style. So I just want to talk about that. And then there are also many of us, in spite of our very distinguished performance in other areas, we cannot write letters. We cannot write reports. When you find this out when you set up, when we attend, maybe we are in a committee like this, and then at the end you say someone should submit a report of what transpired. Not a news report, a formal report, a formal communication having its own style and structure. We do not also worry about or care to know about how to put together memoranda, notices, communiques, resolutions, or issue bulletins or press releases, and even to keep minutes. These are all forms of writing which demand creativity. They have their own style, and we need to know how to write them. I'm not going to be able to do this, and I believe that through the big effort of my friend and brother Oko, we'll be able to have some session where some aspects of these would be treated, because we find it very interesting. Some of us cannot even fill forms. If you are applying for something and then they give you a form, then you find out that you make so many mistakes. Professors make such mistakes, and many others. So we need to be careful. So now let's talk about writing skills. Here I want to just remind us about the basic writing skills that we are familiar with. We begin with speaking. Well, we speak. All of us learn how to speak, but speaking is known everywhere as the first form of communication that we as human beings were exposed to. Those of you who are Christians, you would have heard or read in Genesis when we're told how God spoke to, or how God, that is the three persons, the triune God, they stayed together, and the head said, let us do this. Let us do this. Let us create man in our own image. Even though today many people are telling us that those things were figurative expressions, that we don't have to think that God actually spoke. Because even when you say God spoke, what language? My people will say he spoke in our language. I'm talking about yes. The English will say God spoke English, the French, the same thing. So, but then the most critical, the most pervasive, if you look at the literature on this, listening is one of the least taught of the skills. Listening is the companion to speaking. You say maybe the opposite, because when you speak, someone has to listen. And listening is a very important skill. All of us, from when we wake up to when we go back to bed, listening occupies our activities. But yet, in schools, we are hardly taught how to listen. Many of us do not know how to listen, even in places like this. Although it is known that it is difficult for you to maintain 100% attention when someone is speaking. As the person is speaking, something will come to your mind. Maybe there was something you did not do at home. You forgot. There was an appointment. You didn't, you also forgot. And then your mind goes there. Then you sweep back your thoughts to the venue. Then, so that I don't take too much time on all these, we have reading, we have writing. We have another skill called visual representation. The kind of thing that my brother Oko was doing with the aid of his laptop and the the projector, yes. So when you represent, it demands a skill. There are many of us who have not mastered this skill well enough. And so when we are presenting, in some places, you find that the presenter holds a laser pointer and then everything goes on smoothly. Sometimes electricity becomes a problem. Sometimes the system could have a problem, and you would pause for a while. So representing, visual representation now presents to us one of the skills that we have to learn if we haven't done that. And then one of the challenges that many of us also face is that when you want to use illustrations, you may not be able to find appropriate images from your culture to use for the illustration, for illustrative purposes. And the nearest thing you would find will be from one of those things that are there in your system, in your computer. And then the image may be that of a white family or white people doing the things that you want to illustrate. I beg of you, from today, don't use those white images when you are illustrating. If you have something to show us, let it be from your black community. Because if you go abroad, maybe, and I can tell you, you may not find white people using black illustrations. I can tell you others, that is when you are maybe in an academic situation. It is not that they don't think that those things are proper. They think that they have to do it for to promote their race. There is still racism everywhere. So we also have this you may not use frequently, but it is also very effective when you are presenting, especially under in a situation of visual presentation and then visual representation. That is the use of silence. Silence brings to the viewers, the listeners, a very powerful message. When you expect to hear some words and the presenter is silent, or the person you are in communication with decides to be silent, there is a powerful message there. It doesn't have to be someone who is shouting, because sometimes when you shout, they think that that is when you are really talking. But if you decide not to talk, in a situation we refer to as non-talk situation, you refuse to talk when people expect you, when the expectation is that they want to hear something oral from you, then you know that if the person is doing it strategically, because there is what we call strategic silence, especially in visual presentations. So if it's intentional, the message will be received. But if it is accidental or done ignorantly, then you know that there is also something wrong. A different kind of message, perhaps negative. A friend of mine has often been fond of presenting this kind of image. He says, you have a very beautiful wife at home. It is not a sexist joke. And then your friend comes when you are not in, and your wife is not, let's say, is not educated, cannot speak the one they call Turenchi. And you get to the house, Madame comes over to you, good evening, Madame. How is Oga? Did he leave any message for me? That kind of communication will tell you exactly who you are dealing with. When, you see, in our culture, when people come from other cultures, and if you ask Ediek Benyon, who talks about music, he will tell you that there are certain forms of communication you cannot, that even though the message will be universal, you cannot interpret the situation in the same way everywhere. A pianist is on the board, on the keyboard, is moving his fingers on the keys, playing a very magnificent tune, and you are so excited by it. And then the audience begins to clap. That is not a universal way of responding. That is perhaps, we can say, African, because we do that to many of our traditional dancers. When the dancing gets to the crescendo, you are so excited, you start clapping. And so many other things that happen in such situations. You need that kind of understanding to know that that is not the moment for you to clap. So for me now to take this background of the skills lead you into creative writing, I would like to give you a short definition that creative writing is writing meant to to evolve emotion in a reader by communicating a theme. Such theme you have in the story being told, even in non-fiction and fiction. So creative writing is something that you bring into your work, something that works on the emotions of the reader, because the person will get excited. So your story would become very interesting because you have brought into it some invention, some originality. You have formed some things that the reader may not have thought about at the time. You have designed your writing in such a way that it is exciting to read. When you start, like even in a good news story, you won't drop or stop reading until you've gotten to the end of it. You won't put down the newspaper until you've got to the end of it. So that is something, that is when you bring in creativity into your writing. And that was why I mentioned something about humor at the beginning. That humor is one of those things that can hook someone to your story. In journalism, we have creativity. The way you present stories. I've just given you earlier the way you can cast your headline, and then you know that someone would be fascinated by it. Sometimes you cast headlines that don't mean anything. People will become distracted, and then they won't want to even read you. So your writing style must be original. All of us have our own styles of writing. That is why it is easy for us to talk about when you are maybe doing a review, you can say that a particular style reads like Shakespeare. That is, if you're reviewing a work, that also means that you have read Shakespeare's work. Or you know that this work is Christopher Marlowe's work, even if you have not seen the title of it, because of the way, and that is why, well, I just mentioned two figures in English literary history that are said to have written in similar ways. Christopher Marlowe, some of the plays that Christopher Marlowe wrote, some people said that those plays were written by Shakespeare. Or even some of Shakespeare's plays, some said because they were contemporaries. So, creative writing is a form of artistic expression. It's an art that you are into. You want to get people, because you see, in the highly competitive world of the media, you want people to read you. You want people to read your story. You cannot afford to be writing flat stories, or, well, you have a formula, the old formula, which I believe Uko also believes in, the 5 W's and 1 H in news writing. So, how are you going to like a short story, there must be a character. And you can identify the character. That is why sometimes people identify Kongi in Kongi's Harvest as Wale Soyinka. The works of Uko, like in his rock and roll years, and all those things that he used to write in those days when he was actively in practice here. I don't know how much of practice he's now doing as a teacher. So there must be a voice, and the voice could be the author's unique style to recognize the author's written voice. The way you would be able to recognize the different his different writings wherever they appear, or distinguish one form of one writer from the other. That is where you're talking about voice. Then you have character. The character's development is the art of imagining and portraying the characters you have in your story in such a way that the detail that seem real to the author and the reader or general audience would be shared by every person. That is, you know, the character in this work. This is the, or let's simply say that you are talking about someone, a popular character that everyone can relate to, because that character is real, presented in a way that everyone can actually identify. Then in your story, whether it's in feature writing, or if you want to look at an organizational source, the newspaper editorial, look and say, this is the point of view. This is the position of this particular newspaper, because that is the, you know, their style, you know, the, how would I describe, something that they have always been associated with. That is their point of view. So the writer, journalist, or the creative artist uses the perspective on the characters and occurrences in the story they have created to create a point of view which is often interpreted to be the voice of the writer or the character or the voice of the group. That voice must be there. When you read an editorial from the Watchman Post, for example, or from the Pioneer, or from the Censor, or from Leadership, if you have been a regular reader, you will know their point of view. And so that point of view must be there in your writing, your creative writing. And through this, the reader or audience is able to determine the voice and character and be able to attribute these to whoever they are able to realistically or factually or even imaginatively link to the character or action or voice in the story. It should be in that, it should be such that the reader will be able to link the voice, link the point of view in that story to maybe a particular person. That is why sometimes when you write, your handwriting, there are handwriting experts who can say, yes, this is his handwriting, it matches. Or those who study, who have studied the way your sentences, the sentence lengths, the popular phrases that you use, they can say, yes, this is the man, even if you try to deny. I was told recently that one of the publicists of one of the parties who issued the result, what he said was the result that was taken from the IREV of INEC. And after releasing that report, well, I don't know whether he did, but that's what people suspect, that he must have done that. It sounded like him, but because the man knew the implication of being accused of making a statement on an issue that was before the courts, he denied. But if they were to pursue it, they can use the style of writing, his sentence length, and so on, to catch him. That would still be not a very perfect way, but it would just be some guessing. Now, what steps do you need to take in writing creatively? In fact, the first step for any writer is to choose your theme. Choose your theme. Know the theme that you want to write on, the topic or the idea or the issue that you want to talk about. When you choose it, you must turn it around in your head, in your brain. Know what am I, even if you are doing a feature or you want to write an editorial or a short story, you must have a theme. Then after that, I would like you to note an important step. This step, in fact, should come before you even start thinking about the topic. That is, you should master the rules of the language that you are going to use in writing it. Incidentally, for most of us here, for all of us here, our language is English. Most of us write in English. I don't know whether there are those who write in the vernacular newspapers. They are here, but I think most those who write in English. So you must master the rules of grammar. And in doing this, you have to have certain resources. Such resources must be at your fingertips. Should be available around you in the office where you work. That is why if you go to a good newspaper, it would not lack both electronic means of accessing information and the non-electronic, where you can go to your library and do research on the topic, or where you can interview people to get more ideas on that topic, so that when you write, because you are writing, those who are going to read have not told you that they don't have any work to do. So you have to write in such a way that they would have a longing to read. So the next, which is part of the rule of grammar, know your punctuation marks. Know your punctuation. In American writing, it appears to me when I have looked at them, tend to ignore some of the punctuations that we use here. But it's not the same in the UK when you read their books. Punctuation marks, we know, are the equivalent of the stops you make when you are speaking. So you need to place them in the right position so that no one will misinterpret you. How I wish I had prepared better than this. I would have given you an illustration of a statement where the wrong placement of a particular mark changes the meaning completely. It doesn't make the statement invalid, but it changes the intention of the writer. So punctuation is very important, but we shouldn't overuse the commas. There is a tendency sometimes, because you want to be perfect, you use more commas than may be necessary. So that is just one. But when you get to a question, there must be a question mark. If you write a question and there is no sign to indicate that it is a question, then you'll be confusing your readers. The same thing when you've gotten to the end of the statement and you've made your point, then you know what mark to follow. So that is one other step that you should take to ensure that you understand the punctuation marks. The next is understanding spellings of the language, especially used in your own environment. Because Nigeria, well, as a teacher, I normally tell my students that when you write, when you spell, ensure that you follow the convention that the colonials left with us, that is the British. But if you've had some of us have had education outside the British sphere of influence. Let me specifically say you've had American influence. Then you should follow that, but follow it consistently. You find that sometimes you write a story, in one part you find the British way. Be consistent. But my advice to Nigerians is that let us follow the British spelling system so that you don't get confused. Because sometimes you may find American spellings confusing. I remember one at a workshop I attended where an American facilitated. He was arguing, why should you have program? You should end with M. What is the me there for? What is the me there? It should end there. Many words like that, but there is also some inconsistency because of the roots of some of the words that we have received in English. There are some words that you begin to wonder why they are spelled that way, especially those words that come from Greek words, or sometimes from Indian words. And then we really sometimes have to look at the roots. Like we talk about kidnapping here. kidnapping is almost everywhere. But kidnapping doesn't carry the old meaning that it used to carry. That the old meaning of snatching a child and taking that child away, hiding that child away. Excuse me. So we have to be careful about such words, because words change in meaning and usage from age to age. There was a time when Sister Florence here was called a boy. So if I refer to Florence at some age as a boy, it was not out of place, but later. Now, if I call her a boy now, it will be trouble. Maybe it will be a form of abuse. Haircut, okay. No, okay, so even girl. Girl, there was a time when the word girl covered the two sexes. So you were also, when I was young, I was called a girl. I could have been called a girl, and so on. And the female person also would be called a girl. So we need to look at these conventions and other spellings coming from from words that have been borrowed from many languages. We know that English has borrowed quite a lot from different languages. After these preliminary stages, then we have the very important step of gathering data, gathering information, researching, we would call that. We have to research the topic. I have alluded to this earlier, but it's important that I mention it here as a separate step. Researching. It's very, very important that we research everything we want to write about, unless we can say that we've carried everything in our heads. And also, there is something I learned and in Abuja this week, which was part of the fact that, well, for me, it wasn't really a new learning, but it was good that some of my colleagues were exposed to that thought. If you do research, it is not that you are doing something, you are gathering information, quoting from people. It is not bad. But remember that this is not a research paper. So it's not a research article, so you are not going to fill it with quotations unless you are writing about quotations. So I also believe that the rule of acknowledgement when you quote is very important in journalism, not necessarily in writing academic papers. Let people know. In fact, it exposes you. It makes people know you and think that you are an honest writer, that you acknowledge others. They say in a book of, in a certain book of insults that I read some years ago, I always like to buy such funny books. The writer says that if you take an idea from someone, that is plagiarism. But if you take ideas from several authors, that is research. So, well, I don't want you to take that seriously because it's a book of humor. And I also use this other one when I look at student papers. When students refuse to honor the fact that they had the idea from somewhere, and sometimes students copy whole theses from others. I went to examine, I'm afraid I have to mention the university, one of the big universities in this region, the University of Port Harcourt. And the student, well, two students, they wrote on a topic in the area of advertising. And they took on the company MTN. One just changed the topic a little by making the area of research her village. The other one had the same topic but added her own village also. So when I was reading, because I had the opportunity, I was going through and I saw the topics, they looked similar. I said, okay, let me just read it because I wasn't, in our examination system, we are not obliged to read all the projects. So I said, let me look at this. I read this one. I looked. One was so bad that she, in the acknowledgement, she acknowledged the parents of the source that she stole from. Because, you know, even if you are saying, I would like to, my father, Mrs. This, I mean, my mother, Mrs. This, contributed this much to my life, and I see your name is, you are not, you are Ngozi Okonkwo, and your mother is supposed to be Madam Patience Okonkwo, and then you are acknowledging, you are saying my mother, even though it is in the realm of possibility that she could be bearing another name, but you are acknowledging a name that is not the same with yours. And then this other person also copied the same project. And how I found out was, I said it is not possible because everything was exactly the same apart from place names, but the figures used even in the tables were the same. Because I had to call them on the day of the examination and ask them what happened. One audaciously said, this is my work. I labored for it. And somehow she didn't know that I tried to do my personal investigation and found out that this project was found in a library and in a polytechnic. But these were university students. So the other one confessed, said, I'm sorry, at the time I was pregnant, I didn't have time to do this and all that. So it could be very, very embarrassing to you, and you'll never be taken seriously by those around you. Actually, some universities have different practices. In Uyo, that is considered an examination misconduct. And you would have been actually either expelled or for that, or be rusticated for a period of time. But somehow, I think in that university, I was told, Prof, don't mind, we'll ask them to rewrite. So anyway, we can condone some things that are not that shouldn't be condoned. So research is very important in your topic. After you have researched and gathered all the data from interviews, from libraries, from your phone, from whatever source, you now have to sit down and write your first draft. It is important that you do this. Whether you're using your laptop or your phone, write. Let that be your first draft. And when you have written that, unless it is, even if it is a news report, I know that if it is a daily newspaper, maybe the report is scheduled to come out in the next day's publication or edition. You may be thinking you won't have time. If you just rest it for a short while and allow your eyes to be off the script or your system, and then give some minutes and then go over. That is what we'll call reviewing. Reviewing your draft. You do that yourself. You can also ask your colleague to do it for you, because it will be a way you can see things in your mind, but those things are not there. So when some other person looks at it, they will be able to identify and say, oh, okay, the person may not be better than you in your grammar, in your punctuation, because you are looking at all of these together, rather than to go and punish the reader with the faults that may be contained therein. Then the next step will be for you to get into editing. You may do the editing yourself, or you pass it on to, if you are if you have someone in the hierarchy who would take care of it, but you do the editing yourself. You start from yourself before you pass it on. And then, or you can also ask someone to do some proofreading for you. Sometimes we run away from the rigors of doing this because we are too proud. Or we think that somebody may think that you didn't do well, you didn't write well. As I stand here, I am still learning how to write. In the newspaper where I work, when I finish my column, I pass it on to my editor-in-chief. He had said that he didn't want a younger person to read it, but a younger person can do that. Because one of the things I learned in the university was that you must be a very humble person. Everything would become close to what you would have wanted it to be. But it doesn't mean that it would be perfect, because some other person may not be diligent about the proofreading and would allow some things to pass. And in the end, what you have there, and you see, this word. There was a time I'm happy that Henry is here, Henry Income. When I used to write for Censor, okay, no, was it Censor or Pioneer? And I captioned something about, my caption was about someone being a scapegoat. And whoever did the recasting made it an escaped goat. So you will be embarrassed, but you are not the one who created that. It's someone higher up there. But that's part of the beating that you have to take when you are in our resource staffed newsrooms or organizations. One thing that I have always been afraid of is the hangman that comes down when you are presenting, passing on a piece of paper, telling you you better start going, otherwise something might go wrong. I just talking about creative headline or creative casting of headings for your stories. I wrote a story for the Pioneers some years ago, and it was changed. Slightly changed, but it didn't capture exactly what I wanted. My editors did that. They have the right to. But I captioned it because I still went back, and up to today I still feel that that original heading should have been left. At that time, the state was talking about ghost workers. And I captioned the story, Ekpo and the miracle workers. Well, it was changed the aspect of, I think Ekpo was taken out and all that. But I would like to say that, as I said, I want to repeat this. I said before that maybe this kind of exercise is very, very good by my own estimation. But I think that maybe for the level we are, the times we are, this would not be adequate because there are still a lot of things, it's practical things actually, when you talk about creative writing. The words, the imageries, metaphors, and all those things that come with creativity. We need to have more time to look at those things, and maybe for me, if I'm volunteering, I would do it for free if you provide a forum. I will just come and give you a short talk. So thank you very much. I hope I haven't bored you for too long.
Thank you very much, sir. That applause was for the paper he presented. We can do another one for the one he has volunteered to do. Thank you, sir. I think we may have one or two comments to make, maybe questions or anything from what he has presented. All right.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and our guest lecturers. Thank you so much. Prof, when you were talking about visual representation, and no, you said that we should try to avoid using foreign illustrations and image. But you see, Prof, is like we found ourselves in a situation where we can't help. I give you an instance. I was doing a story on International Day for the Elderly, and tried to demonstrate the need how to care for the elders. And I discovered that I went to the net, tried to see I can get some pictures, some videos to back up my story. And I couldn't get any black video that talks about how to care, seeing samples of, because since I'm dealing with television, I need to show my viewers that this is how these things should be done. And I was left with no option but to rely on the foreign video to demonstrate. So in most circumstances, we found out that we can't, even when we try to make sure that we do not make use of some of these, we also do it. And then also we're talking about the issue of punctuations and marks. And for those of us in broadcasting, I was discussing with my colleagues, how do we, apply these marks in our writing? Because the viewers are not seeing our scripts. They're only, hearing us. So how do we? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's the answer, the stock answer that I've always received. The important thing, I hate to sound maybe racist, but I'm not racist. You know that for me, everyone here sees me like when I went for the program in Abuja, someone said, I've been reading your books, but never seen you. And she told me, this is a professor, she said, she thought that I was a white man. When she says the name Des Wilson. Mine is something of an accident. Well, not an accident as such, but something that has to do with our history, church and all. So you get baptized, you had to take on some saint's name. And that's why I sometimes ask, Peter, where he came from. He didn't know my ancestors. The writers of the Bible never knew people from my area. So when they brought religion to us, those were the prime examples they had. And so they told us, if you had a name like Akponibut, they said that one is not the kind of, it's not a Christian name. Or you have a name like Imabasi. Because he doesn't understand what Imabasi means, he thinks he must change to Peter. So it's a problem. But I can tell you that many writers abroad, many producers abroad, would not bring you the images that are from Africa except to denigrate you. I remember that in 1977, when we hosted the Festac 77 Cultural Jamboree, Time magazine wrote a story which was supposed to, a cover story which was supposed to be on Festac. And what did they do? They went to Mushi, Ajegule, and covered all the gutters, all the drainage, very dirty spots. And then they were pointing at the fact that these were people celebrating the culture they are celebrating. So I think that it is a challenge to us, the ICT people, the various people involved in producing some of these icons. Let them do their own work. I see it as a sign of laziness that we are not ready to go into the rigors of creating those things and getting them into the system. That is why we fall back very quickly. Maybe we are faced with deadlines that we have to meet. And then the only thing is just to click something, transfer something from somewhere and put it there. But, well, let us now think that if we had not been doing it, there is need for us to do it. Let us promote our race. If you don't do it, nobody else will. They don't. When you look at the textbooks, do you see when they are showing people maybe at a social gathering, if they are showing riots, they will show black people there. If they are showing places or events that are very pleasant, they will show their members of their race as being the ones there. So we too, we should not think about people like us. Don't mind the Anglo-Saxon names that are there. Just listen to what I say. Don't say that, oh, well, what about him? He's wearing this. Now, I can't, when I go and change my name now, what will it? I tried to do that many years ago. And some people said, people will say that you have come by some certificate, because people were doing that. If you have a new certificate, you go and change your name in the paper that you are bearing that name. I worked for WAEC some years back when I left school. So I remember that we saw those cases. So that taught me, even though I had picked a name that I wanted to use. Somehow I also think that maybe it is not right for me to change the name that I was given. Like for example, I can't change Wilson, which is the name, is my father's name. But the one that I was given in church, maybe I can, but my church is very rigid on these names. That when you are baptized, you have one. When you are confirmed, you take another. And so you have. So I always ask, my good grandfather, doesn't he deserve to be remembered? That you have people from your culture who were very good people. They are not remembered as saints. But we have those whose activities on sainthood have been documented. These are the ones that are I'm not saying that they are not saints from when you read the story, but we also had our saints, but they were not. So when you say you name your child a Kaite, they say, no. A Kaite, that means you are bringing ancestral curse. Or you say a Teka or something. All those things, I think we should try to change them now. Gradually, it may be difficult. I think you asked two questions. One had to do with punctuation. Okay, punctuation, yes. So when you are reading the news, you say, here's the news by Florence. I took. Come on. Oh, full stop. No, you don't do that. I said that punctuation marks in newscasting on TV or radio are represented in print by those marks. But when you are speaking, those stops those breaks, the length of the stop, whether if it's a short stop, it's a comma. If the next stop is, it's slightly longer than a comma, but it's not, you have not reached the end of it, then you can talk about a semicolon, and then where you have, or when you exclaim, you know that is exclamation, there is a mark in the written form. So that is what, it is not that it can be physically or visually presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. I want to add to what you just said, especially when I heard about the issue of punctuation in broadcast journalism. I think what presenters of today should know is that for you to start writing, the first form of communication is the spoken word. That means for you to even know where the punctuation is supposed to be, you first read what you write. When you read, you will know that this is where I'm supposed to put a pause, put a full stop, put a semicolon. Take for example, somebody says, "Let us eat, Granny." Another person says, "Let us eat, Granny." The two sentences are the same words, but because of the pause, "Let us eat, Granny," "Let us eat, Granny." The second one says, "Granny, let us together eat." But the other one can be misconstrued to say, "Let us go and eat, Granny." So those pauses are those things that affect the meaning of a sentence. And it is the same thing in the broadcast or the print journalism. So let me also please appreciate the fact that most television stations today rely on the internet. But the problem is that they also have their own opportunity of being original. And how would you do this? If you're talking about the elderly, all you need to do is to go get pictures of the black person or the person in your community who are the elderly and store. Any day you want to do something about that, you use it. When you want to get something about the crowd in you or anywhere, you have visuals, your pictures, the videos here, you pick it. Even like we are sitting down today, I have a video of this, I get it. Any day I want to talk about seminars or workshops or anything, that is my representation. I don't have to be on the internet. It makes today's journalists a lot more lazy than what they were before in those old days that people had to read and do researches. So I think that along the line, this workshop has been so wonderful, and I really want to appreciate that because you're really making us to enjoy it more and more.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to add that when we talk about creativity, even in the visual medium, there was one man, one of you, in the 90s or early 2020. I remember that he did something creative. At that time, AKBC TV did not have a teleprompter. And of course, for those who didn't know what it was, who had not seen it before, if you watch news on BBC TV or BBC World News, and they saw the man just reading, they would think that the man had committed all the items into his head. So this man decided, he decided to use a board and wrote the story on that board. And then when the camera was focused on him and he was casting the news, you would look as if he was also saying it from his head. So that was some form of creativity. That was before they even had the first teleprompter.
All right, I think we are done for now. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you very much. Thereafter, we shall be listening to the only Eddie Ekpenyong here, but we would have just 5 minutes for our breakfast here. Tea served, please. Just 5 minutes before we listen to Mr. Eddie Ekpenyong. Because there's lunch. Otherwise, we will jump here 5 minutes or 10. For those of us who were in boarding, 3 minutes is even enough to slaughter that. I think, Prof, you could lead from here.